Test paper 9 is about a composite paper of paper 1, and it goes into comprise of all of these questions from physical geography as well as human geography section. As usual, this paper will not go to comprise any locational aspects and it goes on to be comprising of these 5 normal and usual sections of geography divided into 50 marks roughly of sorts. The first is about geomorphology finds itself applied in almost every day-to-day activity and phenomena. This is about applied geography, applied geomorphology, and its model answer has been given to you. Same is the case with analyze the different scalar levels of climatic change along with its causes. That's also with you. And the third one, that is 2A, explain tropical atmospheric instability and its impact. Now that goes on to bring us on to a discussion of question number 2B, trace the evolution of law of sea. What the students have to take care of is the historical significance of this topic and the historical evolution of this topic. Law of sea is about how exactly the present law of sea has been made. So the present law of sea goes into comprise of the territorial zones, the maritime zones, the exclusive economic zone, and so on and so forth. How is it that this law went on to evolve is what exactly goes into concern this topic and this question. Effectively, the topic that we are going to be discussing is going to be all about the Western perspective of the evolution of law of sea, not exactly in Indian perspective of it. Because some of you may go on to know that when the whole of Europe was suffering from dark ages, India at that time was flourishing. The Chola used to be the biggest naval empire in the whole of the world at that point of time. Also, you can go on to understand that India had been a naval power almost right from its beginning. It was not matched by any of these Western countries. The Western countries came into prominence only after 12th century, particularly when the Spanish and the Portuguese government went on to sponsor a lot of travels, journeys and explorations around the whole of the world. So we are taking a Western perspective. That's not 100% correct, but that is what will be required for your examination. This means there have been several phases of it. The first phase was going to be dominated by the Greco-Roman period. The Greco-Roman period was the one where the Greeks and the Romans went on to consider that the area that they were living was the only area in the whole of the world, and Athens was the only city in the whole of the world, and that they were the most superior people in the whole of the world, and that the sea around it was a heavenly of sorts. The trade that was taking place between between Greece and that of the Roman kingdom, that is Rome itself, Italy. And that is where they consider that is all about law. The law was how is it that the ships can go on to sail in those regions, in the Mediterranean as well as in the Adriatic Sea, in both of these places. Then comes the age of explorations and discoveries. That went on to follow after Dark Ages. So Dark Ages was when a whole of knowledge was under the dogmas of the church, and that knowledge was not logical in nature at that point at all. At that point of a time, when the age of explorations and discoveries came, a good number of Spanish and the Portuguese emperors went on to sponsor a good number of journeys for the people in the whole of the world. So it was Marco Polo, it was Magellan, it was Columbus, it was Vasco da Gama, it was Amerigo Vespucci, it was any of these people one can go to think of. Now there were two kingdoms that went on to travel through the whole of the world, and people were two countries. One was Spain and Portugal. And the law of sea that went on to evolve at that point of time was that is the whole of the sea is owned by only two countries, Portugal and Spain. That is what was the meaning of law of sea at that point of time. Now that goes on to bring us to the third phase, that was during the 16th, 17th century. By that time, mercantilism had started, and some of these countries had started colonizing some places. some of these places that have been colonized, to maintain those places, a good amount of arms, ammunition, and other things were required in general. Now, all of those things that were going to be required at that point of time and in that region, that meant that what was the cannon power of these countries, and to what extent these cannon powers were effective, that was what was most significant. So, British went on to fire a cannon, and they went on to find that their cannon goes on to land 5 kilometers away from the coast. So they demarcated that 5 kilometers the area of the sea that they go on to own from the whole of the land. Now, other countries went on to follow the suit, and they said that if British have 5 kilometers, then our cannon also goes on to 5 kilometers. Someone said 6 kilometers. Just to show their superiority, and in an ad hoc manner, they all went on to demarcate this boundary. Now, while this development went on to be, at that point of a time, the colonizing powers went on to be strong enough to go to other countries' shore and near to their coast, and then go on to extract these riches, and after having extracted the riches, what they could have done was they could come back again. Now, this went on to allow a good number of countries to see it with anger. But they were not able to do a lot of things. But then there was an apparent desire within these countries, that is, this ad hocism must go on to end of sorts. So in 20th century, this is what happened, and one of these countries went on to say that is the entire of the area around 100 kilometers is theirs. Now, other countries went on to follow their suit. They said that it's 200 kilometers for Peru, 300 kilometers for some other countries, and so on. So it was completely arbitrary by that point of a time. It was by Second World War that Truman went on to declare that is the entire of the continental shelf is theirs. That is something like some 200 kilometers of area away from the coast was theirs. Now, he had certain things in design, and that design was that these are the areas that are going to be rich in terms of mineral resources, oil resources particularly, and oil had gone on to become significant by that point of a time. And that, because oil was significant, that's why he said that this area is completely mine. Now, again, a lot of countries went on to follow the suit, and they said that if he talks about 200, then 300 kilometers is ours, and so on, so forth. So it was all something like a bedlam of sorts. So arbitrary it was. After the formation of the United Nations, one of these persons from Malta, he was the ambassador to United Nations, Dr. Arvind Pardo. He went on to take this initiative, taking into account the problems that the other countries were facing. So what Dr. Arvind Pardo did was that he went on to travel to almost all the countries, took their matter into account, and after having taken this into account, he started formulating what can be an effective method by way of which one can go on to formulate a law of sea which can be easily acceptable by almost all of these countries. All of these countries went on to endorse it as well, and they said that, well, we endorse it, we endorse it, we endorse it. Ultimately, he went on to bring all of these countries onto a central table. That was in 1972. That was a conference that went on to take place. After this 1972 conference that took place, he was in a better position to frame a law of sea, and good number of countries still were encouraging in nature. They all agreed that is the greatest measure of all of those countries will be concerned, that will be taken care of, and they will again go on to meet in 1981 to pass what is called as the law of sea. And they met in 1981, they passed the law of sea, but then when this law was passed, all of those countries incidentally who were the one who were encouraging Dr. Arvind Pardo to formulate this law of sea, they were the one incidentally who were absent. So it was passed out of some members who were present, a good number of members were present, more than 116 were present, a good number of them were absentees, and a good number of them went on to be non-participating in this case as well. But by and large, the law of sea was passed. What the law of sea went on to talk about is given to you as a part of a study material, that is in the form of maritime zones. Now, this is not a part of the answer, but a student is likely to know these topics for themselves. Subsequently, thereafter, India went on to instigate one event that was to take place, and it was to an extent instigated by India, but then that was in the minds of the countries that were formulating the law of sea, and it was under the aegis of a United Nations Convention on Law of Sea, UNCLOS. So India was the first country in the world that was given the pioneer status of mining polymetallic nodules from the seabed. Now, as India went on to do that, it went on to send some message to the country that anyone can go on to come and they can go on to exploit the riches of the oceans. To this effect, an International Seabed Authority was established. The International Seabed Authority came out with a solution that if any country wishes to mine from the ocean bed, what they have to do is they have to share some resources and technology with the International Seabed Authority to the tune of 50%. They will go to give this to the International Seabed Authority, the investment as well, plus the technology as well. And whatever that has been produced, that will be shared by both of these countries. That is International Seabed Authority as well as, let's say, India. So this is how exactly International Seabed Authority came to its conclusion. It went on to pass a law that oceans go on to belong to whom? That is the first question. 2b. Trace the evolution of law of sea. The second question that we take up is 2c. The method of determination of spheres of influence have become more observational rather than quantitative. Explain with examples from modern digitally evolving India. The topic is more about a sphere of urban influence or city region and so on, but with examples from India, and that is pretty applied in nature. Now this question is applied in nature that way. Once we have to begin with it by talking about what exactly a sphere of urban influence is. So a sphere of urban influence or hinterland or city region or urban spheres of influence means the same thing. That is, a city is able to wield some amount of influence up to a point and beyond which the other city terminates. This area, which is under the influence of the city, is determined quantitatively by a variety of methods. For example, one of the methods is what we are going to call it as a gravity model. What gravity model says is that it says that if there are two cities, then two cities will go to attract people from each other in direct proportion to their size and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Meaning that if these two cities are going to be, if the one city is going to be larger and the other is going to be smaller, then both of them will go to attract. The larger city will go to attract more and the smaller city will go to attract less. That was one. But then it was not demarcating the sphere of influence. It was only talking about how much amount of movement that will go to take place. Second was law of radial gravitation. Law of radial gravitation went on to assume that there was one center that was going to be in between two large centers. So A and B were large centers and X was a third center that was lying in between them. And said that two cities influence the intervening center in direct proportion to the size of their population and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the intervening center and the main center. So A and B will go to attract trade from X depending upon what is the size of X, what is the size of A in relation to X, and what is the distance difference between X and A and X and B. It was all about trade. So it was assumed that there was going to be an intervening center, and whether this intervening center will go to fall under the sphere of influence of A or B. The breaking point theory actually talked about demarcation of a physical boundary between A and B. These were the two imaginary centers. So the two centers were there, that is A and B, and it talked about that is there was going to be a line that was called as a breaking point that will demarcate between these two centers. Now, all the three methods were quantitative methods. Quantitative methods mean that the distance that was demarcated, or maybe the number of people who were going to be traveling, that was going to be calculated only quantitatively, not qualitatively. The basic demerit of all of these models had been that one, all of these models going to assume that the distance people are willing to travel for different goods is the same. It's not so. How is it that a person will go to travel the same distance to buy a pen or a Mercedes Benz? Not possible. Second assumption it was based was that different people going to travel the same distance to buy the same product, because the income differences were camouflaged in these models. Different people will go on to travel the same distance to buy a product. So how is it that a rich person will go on to travel the same amount of distance as a poor person can go on to travel? A rich person may go on to enjoy his journey and he may go on to move here and there before coming to the destination, desired destination of sorts. The third was, it was not talking about why the people will go on to move. It was only talking about that the people will go on to move. It was not talking about why is it that they will go on to move at all. And it was also quite mum on certain things like sometimes people do try to achieve several errands in one single journey. We talk about several errands in one single journey, meaning that if one has to go for a good amount of a distance, let's say if someone has to go from Delhi to Gurgaon, maybe they will going to try to do 5 things in one single day, because coming back and then going back and then coming back and then going back may going to eat away almost entire of their time. So they will going to plan it in such a manner that will going to travel for the longest distance and they will go on to stay in that place and then after having done their job they will going to come back. It can be the same thing with Bengaluru as well. That is, people can go to Yelahanka and then they will go to think that is they have done their job and they will go to complete their job. Maybe they will go to bunch up a lot of their activities for one single day. So under these conditions, this doesn't go on to be applicable at all. What has been observed recently has been that those cities going to be having a sphere where to which the people are going to be emotionally attached with. For example, there may be a city which is going to be far off, but then it is going to be emotionally attached much more than the other city that is going to be nearby, as is the case of Patna from Delhi. Patna is emotionally much more attached to Delhi in comparison to Kolkata, which is half the distance of Delhi from Patna. So Delhi is almost 1000 kilometers, Kolkata is only 500 kilometers, but still people prefer to go to Delhi. But how is it that this can actually be known and managed? There are several aspects, observational aspects, which can be used. For example, is it that people of Patna going to study the newspapers of Delhi or Kolkata? Is it that they going to make greater number of calls towards Delhi or to Calcutta? Is it that there are greater number of trains coming to Delhi from Patna or they going to go to Kolkata? Is it that there is a greater amount of a flight connectivity from Kolkata to Patna or from Patna to Delhi? Is it that there are greater number of franchises that are going to be available in Patna from Delhi or from Kolkata? Now the theme is, these are observational components and these are far more significant than what we're going to be talking about quantitatively, because quantitative aspects are difficult to apply, difficult to study, and of course difficult, very, very difficult to comprehend as well. Whereas these are observational as well and they can be turned into quantitative aspects as well. The best thing can go on to be something like giving a telephone call, and maybe how is it that they're going to get connected to Delhi or Calcutta by not only a call, by taking a look at the net, by taking a look at anything that is associated with Delhi, activities of Delhi, for example. This is a far better and a far rational method of determining the sphere of influence. And this is what exactly will go on to be in a digitally evolving India. That is question number 2C. The third question is social capital is the most important tool for selecting the state of economic development. Give your arguments in favor and against of it. What the candidate have to do is that they have to begin by first explaining what exactly is meant by economic development. So economic development is a process which goes on to include per capita income, which goes on to include satisfaction level of the people, productivity, increasing productivity of the people, the level of satisfaction that the people have, and it will go on to include empowerment of the people as well. That is whether there is an enlargement of the choice of the people or not. Whether whatever money that they go to earn, is it that they are able to utilize their money to do something that they will to do or not. That is enlargement of the choice of the people. Thus, the state of economic development of any region can be known with the help of income can be one. Then the economic structure is going to be another one of them. That is whether the country is dominated by primary activities, secondary activities or tertiary activities. It can be it can be the productivity of the economy as well. How much is the economy productive? The productive economy is the one that goes on to be productive from the perspective of the use of technology, the use of labor force, what exactly is the type of ambience of work in that place and so on. The age expectancy of the people, the life expectancy of the people, the sex ratio of the region, the state of education, that means how many teachers are per thousand population, how many doctors are per thousand population, how many magazines are going to be per thousand population, and so on, plus PPP, that is a purchasing power parity. Now these are the indices by way of which the economic development of a region or a country can be managed. The limitations of all of these methods are going to be, first, they are very, very segmented. For example, if someone goes to take economic growth into account, they're going to take only something like income of the people, then that is going to be very, very segmented. So it only goes to talk about growth, though it is about economic development, but it's only talking about growth. It leaves certain things like happiness, satisfaction, security, and of course, the equality of opportunity under which the people may be willing to work. I repeat it, equality of opportunity under which the people may be willing to work. That goes into its limitation. Now, it is here that social capital will go on to be coming to rescue of it. Why? Because social capital goes on to be talking about bonding. And bonding means greater amount of a bonding between the people will go on to mean that there is a greater amount of a security. Not only that, if there is a region that is going to be having a good amount of a social capital, it will going to provide a greater amount of an opportunity, because in a country which is going to be dominated by economic growth, almost everyone will going to try to grab all the opportunities that are going to be coming to their way. But when there is a good amount of a bonding, people going to absolve themselves of some type of an opportunity that they may not be able to utilize, and they leave it for someone else. And the same happens with someone else as well, that they go on to bounce out these type of opportunity to someone else as well. Then people are able to differentiate their emotions when they're going to be having a very strong social capital. And when we're going to be talking about differentiation of the emotion, it will go on to mean that is they understand who is their friend, who is their companion, with whom they are doing business. And even if there is a very, very close friendship, they will go on to keep business aside in comparison to that of their emotions. It can go on to be a family business, but then they will go on to keep the relations completely different from that. That's largely because of social capital. Social capital, families used to be one social capital sometime back in India. It's no more that families are social capital. A good number of families incidentally go on to inhibit the growth of the people living in this part of the family, because they keep on pulling the legs of those people. When there is a good amount of social capital, then there are chances of alliances and certain type of franchises evolution as well. Why? Because social capital will go to mean that I am better in something, he is better in something, she is better in something else. So you will start building some type of alliances. You will never going to walk alone. As part of economic growth, most of the people, what they try to do is that They walk alone and they think that they can go to walk very fast. Anyone who can go to walk very fast cannot go to walk long. And unless you go on to take a good number of people with you, there is no way that one can also go on to make the business grow and make the entire society grow as well. Social capital also entails that you're going to respect differences among the people. Incidentally, differences in this case goes on to become an asset as well. When social capital goes into take so many of these things into account, that means it goes on to create a society that is going to be happy. It goes on to enlarge the choice of the people, and it goes on to increase the level of satisfaction, and at the same time allowing them to earn a good amount of money as well. That is why we're going to say that is social development is one of these last stages of economic development. That was question 2D. That brings us to question number 3. 3A is behavioral geography with its philosophy had made a seminal contribution to hazard management and perception. Discuss. And the way the student have to begin with is, first it has to begin by talking about hazard. What exactly is a hazard? A hazard is a natural phenomena that is inimical to the interest of the people living in that area, so it goes on to become a hazard. Any natural phenomena, if it goes on to be detrimental to the interests of the people, will go on to become a hazard. Maybe some of them will go on to call it by the name of disaster as well. So this is what it is. Hazard has two meanings. One of them is perceptual, that's going to be one. Perceptual means that is some natural phenomena may not be so harmful, but because the people are not adapted to it, they go on to feel the harm to such an extent that they go on to feel a stinging war of nature against them. Now, they're going to consider it as a hazard. So that's a perception. In any case, there are natural phenomena, but then someone can always go on to perceive any natural phenomena as a hazard. Whether it can go on to be high heat, whether it can go on to be low heat, it can go on to be very cold condition, whether it can be high velocity winds and so on. They are all part of nature. Third part is that there is a role of technology. There is a role of technology is technology can go on to help you solve some of these problems with the help of it. For example, a person who is going to be affected by a tropical cyclone, if he is going to be living in a cyclone shelter, it is a technology, it's type of a technology. Cyclone shelter happens to be one type of technology. You can accept that technology, you cannot go on to accept that technology as well. So, hazard, what exactly is a hazard? It all goes on to belong to the state of the economy, the state of the person, the state of many things in that place, the state of how is it that the people can go to think about it. Role of behavior in this case means certain things. For example, a hazard can be solved with the help of some management, maybe with civil engineering, maybe with respect to some management technologies, maybe with the help of technology, maybe with the help of satellite technology, maybe with the help of remote sensing and so on, so forth. But then from an angle of behavior, maybe from a behavioral angle, hazards can go on to have a completely different meaning altogether. For example, one of it can be related to acceptance. Why should one go on to accept it as a hazard when they are adapted to it? Acceptance means the first component. If anyone accepts that this is a region that is bound to get flooded year after year, it will not go on to pose so much amount of a problem at all. If they accept it, they are going to start respecting nature as well. And respecting nature means they will start adjusting to the nature rather than complaining it to someone that, well, they're going to get affected by a tropical cyclone or a flood or a drought and something like that. And that they will start adjusting themselves to a preventive environment rather than to a curative environment. Now, when we're going to be talking about curative environment, meaning that it's not that they will go on to rob themselves of almost all of these things subjected to a hazard, and then they will think that the government will go on to come to their aid. So, a behavioral approach in this case will go on to help them adjust to the condition, accept the nature the way it is, and accept it in the truer sense what exactly it is. That was question number 3A. Behavioral geography with its philosophy made a seminal contribution to hazard management and perception. 3B is explain wave dynamics in closed ocean bodies and water bodies, closed ocean basins and water bodies. The student have to begin by trying to answer it. How is it that the waves are generated? The generation of the waves goes on to take place mostly in open oceans, and the place where the waves are going to be generated is what we're going to be calling it as the generation area, that is going to be having capillary waves. This is the storm surface as well, where the winds are moving fast, and these winds going to grip the water surface, and once they're going to grip the water surface, they are responsible for creating certain type of ripples on the water surface. So that's how waves are created. Once these waves are created, these waves go on to move from their original location in the form of a swell. Later on, they're going to become sorted out, and they're going to be converting themselves into waves. These waves come to the coast, and as they're going to come to the coast, the wavelength goes on to decrease and the wave steepness goes on to increase, and consequently these waves going to break at the breaker zone. After breaking, they're going to be converting themselves into a swash zone, and that is a surf zone, that is going to be a white foamy sea, and then there is a backwash of the water that goes on to get accumulated because of the swash. Now that's a normal event in very, very short. When we're going to talk about that is if a closed basin is going to be there, how is it that the waves can be generated? First, the waves will not be very, very high. What can go on to happen is there can be three conditions that can go on to assist it. One of them is winds, another of them is some type of a disturbance like an earthquake, and there can be a third disturbance like something like a landslide. If it goes on to happen, it goes on to fill the closed water body or ocean basin. So assuming that there is a very large lake and the winds have been blowing constantly against one direction, in one direction, they're blowing constantly in one direction. And if these winds are blowing constantly in one direction, then what is likely to happen is all of this water will go on to get piled up in one direction. If the winds are blowing from west to east, then it will go to allow the water to be piled up towards the east. Gradually, and if all of a sudden the winds die out, then all of the water that has piled up in one place will go on to swing towards the other zone, towards the west. So the whole of this basin will start coming into motion, up and down type of motion. This is how exactly seashells are going to be originating. This is the way seashells are. So that is one of the best ways to explain how exactly wave can be generated. Seashells are particularly common in and around certain areas like that of Lake Geneva, where they are very, very common. This one, it can be a lake where certain type of seashells can be generated. In lakes, if the winds are going to be very, very high, very speedy, like in the Great Lakes region, then the water can go on to have a strong force, and it can go on to have a force strong enough to sink ships as well. It has happened in Lake Superior and other regions as well. In some of these bays, for example, in some bays like Alaska Bay or so on, the normal event and the normal phenomena is that these bays go on to have some of these hilly areas, upper areas of the hill goes into getting dislodged, and that goes into slip in the water. As they go into slip in water, then the water goes on to develop waves, and these waves, as they go on to move towards a narrow and constricted basin, the wave steepness goes on to increase. It increases to such an extent that it can go on to take a height of something like some 500 meters as well. Now that is 500 feet as well. That is some type of a elevation that the waves can actually go on to take. So this is because of the enclosed nature of the water bodies, and this is the behavior of the waves in an enclosed body. Next question is 3C. Discuss with examples the influence of plate tectonics on earth movements and ocean bottom relief. Discuss with examples the influence of plate tectonics on earth movements and ocean bottom relief. Now that goes on to mean basically One has to begin by talking about what exactly is a plate tectonics, what exactly is the meaning of plate tectonics, what is the mechanism of plate tectonics. So, plates are rigid bodies or quasi-rigid bodies which have a very high amount of flexural rigidity, and they are unable to bend or flex except under exceptional circumstances. These plates are constantly in motion, floating over the asthenosphere, and as they are in motion, they either go on to collide, they either go to diverge, or they can go on to move parallel to each other. In either case, whether they are going to be colliding or moving away or moving parallel to each other, they are responsible for the creation of certain type of features, a certain type of events, a certain type of phenomena. So plate tectonics allows a lot of earth movements to take place. It allows earthquakes to take place, volcanism to take place, tsunamis to take place, and whatnot. Plate tectonics explains how is it that epeirogenic movement will go to take place. So epeirogenic movement will go to take place if a plate is lying over a mantle plume. And if there is a plate that is lying over a mantle plume, what the mantle plume will go to do is that it will go to move up, and it will go to create a dome, as it has created in East African Rift Valley region. This dome ultimately will keep on doming itself till it goes on to crack. That is East African Rift Valley. That is epeirogenic movement. In a similar manner, one will go on to find that around Baltic Sea, around Lake Baikal, the whole of Siberia is also getting uplifted, and that is going to develop a crack. One crack is already visible in the form of Lake Baikal. It's the same phenomena that is going to be around Yellowstone National Park. It's the same phenomena as it goes on to in Somalia. So there is going to be upliftment in a vertical manner that is called as epeirogenic movement. Orogenic movement, like extension or maybe collision, goes on to be subsequently developed when plates either going to collide or they're going to get themselves stressed out in that place. So that is how it goes on to lead to formation of fold mountains, and when it goes on to get itself stressed out, it goes on to lead to formation of block mountains plus some type of rift valley, like the East African Rift Valley, like the Narmada Son Damodar lineament, like even Baikal Lake as well. So all of these are the zones of stretching. So one is because of compression and another is because of tension stress. It will also going to lead to eustatic movements. Eustatic movement, that means that the sea level is going to rise or fall. That is eustatic movement. And why the sea level is going to rise? The sea level is going to rise because the ocean ridges will going to get themselves uplifted, or they will going to come down. So the upliftment coming down of the ocean ridges, depending on whether they are forming or not, that will going to allow the water level also to be rising up and down. Plate tectonics also goes on to explain a lot of features in the ocean basin. For example, it does go on to explain how exactly continental shelf will begin. How is it that a continental shelf will form? So two continents together, and as they're going to get themselves stretched apart, the continental plate goes on to become thin. From here it will going to become thin, and then going to get it stretched out. The thin portion will going to become continental shelf, one way. It explains how is it that abyssal hills will go on to form. Abyssal hills going to form in the vicinity of the ocean ridges, where volcanic activity takes place to such an extent that it leads to creation of a mound. And when these mounds go on to get themselves buried under sedimentation taking place for millions of years at the rate of 1 millimeter per year, 1 billion years are going to be enough for them to be buried under 1,000 meters of sediments. So that's how abyssal hills are created. They also go on to, plate tectonics also goes on to explain how is it that a mid-ocean ridge will be created. Mid-ocean ridge will be created when the two plates going to stretch themselves apart, they spread apart. And when they're going to spread apart, the place where the crack is developed, just on the top of the crack, the pressure will be lowered. As the pressure will be lowered, it will go on to lower the melting point. Because the melting point has been lowered, that's why the rocks will go on to melt. because the rocks will go on to melt, they will go on to occupy a greater volume. And because they require to acquire a greater volume, the crack that has gone on to develop in this place, this crack will go on to allow a good amount of materials to come up from beneath and go on to spread themselves out into that place. That is how mid-ocean ridges are going to be created. And then you have abyssal hills. We had talked about sea mounts are created when a plate goes on to move over a mantle plume, and if there is a mantle plume and the sea goes on to, the plates going to move over it, what the mantle plume is going to do is that to create a one volcano here, then another beneath, another beneath, another beneath, as the plates keep on moving. As like the Emperor Sea Mount chain, like the Cosgrove mountain chain that has been discovered, and so on. That is going to be sea mounts. And then trenches. Trenches go on to form when two plates go on to collide, and as they go on to collide, one of the plates going to plunge inside, and it goes on to create a deep vertical fissure of sorts in that region. Now these are not only the only features, but then this is what exactly the question demands in 100 to 150 words or so. Plate tectonics in relation to earth movements in ocean basins. Plate tectonics is able to explain almost everything associated with earth movements as well as ocean basins. This brings us to a third topic, that is going to be question number 4b. But before that, all the other questions, that is, examine the impact of coral reefs of economy and describe various closed coral bleaching mechanism. This has been provided to you in model answer. Same is the case with 3e, that is differentiate between terrigenous and lithogenous deposits is going to be with you. Same is the case with give a brief account of the distribution of different languages. So that goes on to bring us to question number 4b. Discuss critically how environmentalism as a paradigm reflects itself in present thinking. Understand the meaning of this question is. Meaning of the question is that environment is supreme, environment is prime, environment is the center, environment is the core. Is it that such type of a thinking still is pervasive among us? And is it that it still affects our thinking? The answer is yes. But this is what exactly is required to be evolved. That is, the first thing, that the first way in which we have to begin is by explaining what exactly is environmentalism. So, environmentalism goes on to combine determinism as well as possibilism. So, that is, determinism goes on to be a philosophy where there is a given cause of a given effect of a given cause. So, if the environment is going to be warm and humid, it will going to have a given effect. If it is cold and humid, it will have a given effect. It is going to be cold and dry, it will going to have a given effect. If it goes on to a mountainous region, it will be having a given effect. If it is going to be in a hot and dry condition, it is going to have a given effect, and so on and so forth. That means human beings can be a product of the environment, the thinking of this sort, or there is a definitive effect to a definitive cause. That type of effect is very, very, very evident in these regions. That's what we talk of, meaning of environmentalism. Now, is it that at one point of a time, it has to be written here, people went on to observe that it's not environment that is supreme, it is the human beings that are supreme. And human beings are supreme in the sense, and they are supreme also because of the fact that human beings are able to change their environment, they are able to mold their surface, they are able to mold their landscape, and they are able to bring about any type of a change that they wish to bring about in the landscape. So human beings are completely supreme in this case. And then some other paradigms came up, but all in all, as a paradigm, it has gone to re-emerge largely because you will go to find almost in every type of a thinking, there is a central place given to environmentalism or environmental thinking. And how is it so? Just going to think of it. If one goes on to take into account the behavioral approach, environmental thinking there, the environmental hazard, environmental perception. That is, even if you're going to talk about that, the behavior of the people is the more important component which determines the movement of the people in a space, then environment is at the center of it, at the core of it. When you're going to be talking about quantitative approach, most of these quantitative approaches have been used for the purpose of either morphometric analysis, or even coming to know about how much amount of suspended particulate materials are going to be there, or to know AQI, that is a air quality index, or anything of that sort. That is going to be quantitative in nature. Then the third is going to be regional. Regional, that is a regional approach. The central theme of regional approach had been, and regionalism has been, that people will going to demarcate a place that is going to be called as a region. And how is it that they're going to be describing it? They're going to describe its physiography, they're going to describe its climate, its geology, its drainage, its vegetation, its soil. Environment is again the central theme in this case. And when you're going to be talking about movements, you're going to pick up so many movements that have taken place of late, and so many conferences that have taken place. Greenpeace movement, reflective of the core of the environmental thinking. Paris Agreement, core of the environmental thinking. Kyoto Protocol, the core of environmental thinking. The Montreal Protocol, the core of environmental thinking. That is, there is no way that we can go to ignore the environment at all, and we must go on to take care of environment as fast as possible. That means, whether we going to like it or not, and whether we going to think that technology has solved all of our problems, the pervasive thinking with us is that it is environmental thinking that is going to be very, very significant. And that environmental thinking has gone on to be, despite the fact that there have been so many type of changes that have taken place in the philosophy of geography. 4C is about elaborate the concept of megalopolis and discuss the characteristics and problems related to two regions, selecting one each from North America and Europe. Now we have to go on to begin by first defining about what exactly is the meaning of megalopolis. So, megalopolis, as the word defines, mega, that is very, very large, a polis, that is a very large city. Effectively, the word goes on to denote the first agglomeration of urban areas that went on to evolve in the whole of the world. That was a series of towns that had gone on to develop, beginning all the way from Boston to Philadelphia to Washington DC and so on. That is beginning from Boston to New York to Philadelphia and to Washington DC. That was called as Bowash megalopolis. Subsequently, similar type of agglomerations were found in other places as well. For example, one of them was found in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and The Hague. That went on to be called as Randstad megalopolis. And similarly in Japan, the one that went on to evolve, that was Tokyo, Yokohama, Osaka, Kyoto, that is called as Tokaido megalopolis. So this is what exactly is the meaning of a megalopolis. Megalopolis is a normal phenomena for any country that is going to be undergoing through a rapid pace of economic growth. And they can be, either it can go on to be unicentric or monocentric, like Shanghai, like Delhi, like Paris, which has grown out of one large center, or it can go on to be polycentric like that of Bowash, that is, or it can be polycentric like that of Randstad megalopolis. The Bowash megalopolis, or for that matter any of these megalopolis, Bowash megalopolis is one of these case studies that are going to be two of them. The problem that these megalopolises go on to face with respect to that is, one of them is that they are going to be so large that their maintenance and their management is a difficult job. There is the maintenance of the highway, the management of the highways, that is difficult to maintain. The psyche of the people is difficult to maintain in these places. There is most of these people go on to be devoid of a lot of human values in general. And the crime is very difficult to control in these places. There is an enormous loss of human values that is going to be observable in all of these areas, and the people are going to become robotic-like. Of course, it is easy to maintain, but then these are the type of people who go on to become so fond of comforts and other things that they're going to become alarmed at the moment these things are thought of being alarmed, thought of being withdrawn from them completely. Randstad megalopolis goes on to face the same problem, all of these three, but additionally, there is one problem that it goes on to face that is going to be associated with associated with Rotterdam, and that is the silting of the Rotterdam port. This is not the same problem with New York, and in New York the problem is with the city, that is it's difficult to maintain and handle, taking into account the type of crime that it goes on to undergo through at different points of time. So rancid is going to be siltation, is going to be one of them. And of course the second problem is that these are the three cities that are going to be close to each other. The waterway that goes into connect it is very, very saturated, and it's completely saturated that way. The third problem that is going to be again common between all of them is the rising level of employment, the expectation of people in these places. They are not able to get what they're going to be expecting from the life, despite the fact that there are going to be a good number of people who are immigrants in these places as well. So these problems are going to be general, and it's only that is one has to begin by first explaining what is a megalopolis, and then Bauwatch and Randstad one problem which may not be common, but by and large all of them are. That goes on to bring us on to the next topic, that is a 4D. Explain the trends and problems such as with New England region of United States. New England is an industrial region, and being an industrial region, it used to be one of the most important industrial regions in the whole of the world. Right now it is no more so. It has seen a decline. This decline is largely because there has been a rise in the value of the land in that place, rise in the labor cost in that place, rise in the type of advantage that this region used to enjoy some time back. That means it has lost the inertia that way. The third has been, of course, it has been a rise in the labor cost and also the rise in the level of the income, which has made this region very, very unfit for any type of a labor intensive job. So New England region is going to be generally associated with, the trend is associated with the decline of a New England region as an industrial region. But then it has not stopped functioning. What has happened indeed in this region is that although this region is lagging behind in comparison to a good number of regions in the West, for example, it is lagging behind from San Francisco, Los Angeles in the western seaboard of United States. But some of the new trends that have come up in this place is that there are going to be a good number of institutions that have come up that are education based. For example, one of them is Harvard University in that place. That is the richest university in the whole of the world, with so many people giving so much amount of a donation to these places. Right? That is one of them. Other than the problems of New England region, there are three trends that are easily decipherable. One of them is that New England region has gone on to become rich in terms of education. Now this is where you're going to find two of these world's most premier institutions and academies having evolved. One of them is Harvard University. Other of them is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Both of them. So education goes on to be one of these best known activities in this region. Of course, this is largely because the region has lost its inertia of what it was known for earlier, that was cotton textile industry. Second new trend has been that most of these mills which are existing, they have gone on to produce something very, very fine and finer cloths only. It's not about the general mass cloths, they are going to be very, very fine clothes, and that is a new trend in this New England region. The third is New England region has gone on to become significant of late, also from the perspective of a variety of type of tourism activities as well, like what we're going to be calling it as heritage tourism and so on. This is how exactly New England region is surviving. But otherwise, the New England region all in all has gone on to evolve a very, very high lifestyle that is not sustainable in the long run. That was 4A. Now this goes on to 4D. That goes on to bring us on to question number 5A. That is, discuss the role of ENSO in causing climatic fluctuations. This answer is very, very simple. The first is, what is ENSO? ENSO is El Nino Southern Oscillation. Expand on that, and that is Walker circulation. Expand on that, and that will go to mean if the pressure is going to be low in Pacific region, then it will go on to become high in the western part of it. It's almost like there is a periodic appearance of cold current towards the western part of South America or Eastern Pacific. If the currents are cold, then the pressure associated with that will be high. And high pressure will go to entail that whole of Southeast Asian region will go on to have a low pressure. Now, if it is going to be low pressure, then the winds will go on to move from high to low. But then that story is complicated more than that. Because if there is an intensification of this cold current, that is Humboldt current, that's called as La Nina. And this intensification will go to mean that the pressure will go to become very high, and that associated pressure in Southeast Asia will go to become very low, and that there will be a good amount of winds that will go on to blow towards it, come into the Bay of Bengal region, be rail laden to such an extent that will go on to lead to a heavy downpour. Normally this situation goes on to reverse, that is, the currents go on to become warm. As these currents go on to become warm, they are going to be called by the name of El Nino. So a warm current is associated with or is responsible for low pressure. Low pressure in Eastern Pacific will go on to entail that the pressure is going to be high in Southeast Asian region. A high pressure in this region will go on to mean that the amount of rainfall over these regions will go on to become very, very low. Now, this is a seesaw battle. When the pressure goes on to become high in Southeast Asia, it goes into below in other places and vice versa and so on. That's why it's called as oscillation. And the appearance and disappearance of El Nino and appearance and disappearance of La Nina has a worldwide repercussion. The repercussion is that it does go on to cause certain type of aberrations in the climate. For example, India will go on to become dry, largely because the winds that are coming from the Pacific will go on to dry out, will not go on to be carrying so much amount of moisture as they are likely to carry. Australia will start receiving a good amount of rainfall, particularly in the eastern coastal region, and the frequency of the tropical cyclones will also go on to increase. Whole of Malaysia and Southeast Asia will go on to become dry to such an extent, and the winds will start subsiding to such an extent that sometimes it can go on to set fire to the forest as well, as it has happened in the Malaysian forest fires. The fourth aspect is that with the help of it, the amount of rainfall in the Central American regions will go on to become very, very high. Now, these are something that are known. It also goes on to cause a good amount of temperature change over the water body as well, over the oceans as well, and in the ocean regions as well. And such things have been known to have caused a good amount of coral bleaching as well in the Maldives, as far as Maldives as well. Now, these are the weather aberrations that we are talking about associated with El Nino. There can be a lot of other aspects to which it can be correlated, but then the relationship is obscured. With respect to these four regions, by and large, we keep on talking about this relationship that has gone on to evolve. The next question is, rural settlements are a product of its geography. Explain. Effectively, we have to begin by talking about what are rural settlements. So, rural settlements are a combination of dwellings that can go on to have a particular type of a form, a particular type of a pattern. A particular type as well as a particular pattern. Pattern is the one that goes on to follow a geometrical shape and size, while the form is the closeness of the dwellings that a region goes on to experience in those type of places. That is form. How is it that the dwellings are going to be close to each other of sorts? That is rural settlements. Now, these rural settlements go on to evolve in different places, guided by geography. And geography in this case will go on to mean physical geography as well as human geography, both of them. For example, now the topic can go on to become systematically dealing with one by one. For example, the first is can go on to be physiography. Most of these rural settlements will go on to come up not in the valleys but in the high regions. Why? because in the valleys are damp, the valleys do not going to receive sunlight, and valleys are also infested with diseases. Valleys are also unsafe from the perspective and from the point of view of animals. While the upland regions are going to be safe, they are going to be sunny, and they are going to be free from such type of a disease. Number one. Second is, in all of those places where the climate is going to be dry, the people will go on to build very thick walls, and the houses are going to be far apart from each other, because the house of one of them will go on to, that is, if they are going to be very close to each other, generally one of them will go on to affect the other one, and their walls are very thick with a different form. The form is going to be affected because in some of the places the rainfall is very high, and people are going to have a sloping roof as well in those places. In general, the amount of rainfall does not go to determine the closeness of the dwellings or the pattern that goes on to evolve. But then groundwater does go to affect these things. If the water table is very high, then anyone can go to build a dwelling anywhere, and that the whole of the settlement goes on to become dispersed. If the groundwater is going to be very low, then all the dwellings are going to come close together, because there can be only one place where a well can be actually sunk. Not in all places where it is normally possible when the groundwater table is very high. Now this is easily visible. In Rajasthan, the settlements go on to become agglomerated because of the fact that there is only one well in the whole of the village, and around which the whole of the village goes into agglomerate. While in some portions of the Ganga plains, the dwellings are going to be far apart, largely because the water table is so high that anyone can go to obtain water from anywhere that they want. The fourth is drainage and rivers. Drainage and rivers determine it to an extent that is, people go on to build their dwellings on the levees, sometimes on the edge of the river, sometimes on the bend of the river as well. This is largely because that is where they are going to be a greater accessibility of water towards water, and that is where also they can go on to make their cattle drink to water as well, and go on to find an accessibility to water as well. Other than that factor, you have certain factors like vegetation that can go on to affect it. If the vegetation is going to be very dense, people will go on to agglomerate, either in terms of clearing the village, clearing the vegetation, like it goes on to happen with jhum cultivation, or they can start building their dwellings on the tree top. And when they start building their dwellings on the tree top, then that of course allows them to get dispersed throughout in that region. Other than that, there are other factors like what is the type of a cultivation that is going to be having. What exactly is the type of a kinship network that they're going to have. If the kinship network is going to be very strong, then all of these people will go to come close together and agglomerate, as it has happened in the Gangetic Valley. This is because of kinship network. In case, in some places, that is, the kinship network is going to be still strong, but then that is going to be made of different caste groups, then the people will go on to fragment themselves, hamlet themselves into several categories. Like in one place, they're going to have a tola or toli of one caste, in the place of another class, in another place another caste. So the whole of the village will be divided into several community blocks that will be called as locally by the name of tola or toli in that place. That is a kinship network. The type of agriculture, what we have been following, has also been a determining factor. How? If the holdings are going to be fragmented, then all of these people will go on to agglomerate in order to find a simple closeness to the entire of the dwellings. If the dwellings are going to be fragmented, and this is what is the case in India, that is, the dwellings are fragmented in this case. In case the region is going to be completely flat and it goes on to be productive, very productive, and it's productive to an extent like that of prairie, then you will go on to find one dwelling built in one place, and then there will be another one after 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, then another one after 2 or 3 kilometers of such, that will go on to become isolated. In some places, there will be a river that will go on to crisscross another river, and as you go to crisscross another river, a pattern will go to evolve, that is going to be arrow. And if the river is going to be very fertile, very fruitful, then the people are going to build dwellings all along the path of the river, that will going to make it linear. If there is a lake, then the people are going to be agglomerating towards that lake, that will go on to make it circular in nature, and so on and so forth. Now thereafter all going to become a game of how many examples actually that can be given. Of course, this topic cannot be complete, but then it all depends on how many examples is one likely to take. That is 5D. The last of this question, in this case 5E, is trace the changing paradigms in geography. The word is trace. That means the word work is easy. The first thing with which we have to begin is by saying that paradigms have evolved out of the need to define geography. So what is geography? In different phases, different people went on to define geography, and that went on to become one paradigm. So initially, geography was not having any definition. That is Eratosthenes, who went on to use the word for the first time, or Hecataeus, who went on to make the map for the first time. They were not talking about geography. They did something, but then later it went on to be incorporated into geography. There was nothing like any pervasive thinking that was going to be in geography. The pervasive thinking initially in the beginning of the civilization was that environment is supreme, and that environment determines how the human beings will go to live, or where they will go to live, how they will go to behave, and it is environment that goes into affect the day-to-day activities in life of the people. That came to be known as environmentalism. That was one paradigm. When people started talking about environmentalism to such an extent, with such a passion, like what Miss Helen Churchill Semple did, that man is a product of his environment. That means every bone of his is product, the blood of it is a product of it, and things like that. Then, under such a situation or under such a circumstance, people thought that there was need for another paradigm. So some people said that environment is only acting like that of a traffic police. It is acting like a teacher. It provides possibilities, but it doesn't go on to force someone to take that path. So that went on to lead to creation of another paradigm that went on to be called as possibilism. And the paradigm of possibilism was that it is environment that determines, it is the human being that determines which direction they have to take. The direction is indeed provided by the environment. Third is, when both of these people started debating, then some people came with this notion and this concept and philosophy that it is environment affecting man and man affecting environment, both of them are inseparable, and that they cannot be separated out at all. The place where they're going to fuse and the place where they're going to exist is what is called as a region. So that went on to lead to evolution of another of this type of a paradigm that was called as, that was given the name of regional concept. That was the name that was given to it, regional concept. Fourth was, when people said that geography's main philosophy and main definition is to study regions, and that region is the core of geography, and that region is the theme of geography, region is the in of geography, region is the everything of geography, then one person came with an article. It was Fred Schaeffer, Exceptionalism in Geography. With the help of this article, he went on to destroy the entire notion built that a region is unique, exceptional, extraordinary, and so on. So because region is going to be unique, extraordinary, and exceptional, he said that a region is something that is studied only by geographers and by no one else. Because geography studies something unique and exceptional, it's an exceptional subject, but that doesn't go to qualify it to be called as a science. To be calling itself as a science, it must develop its own laws, theories, and models. And unless it develops its own laws, theories, and models, it is not worth called as a science. The moment he said that, it was so convincing that all of these people went on to leave all the paradigms and they started following quantitative revolution. So quantification became another paradigm. So everyone started using mathematics, everyone started using physics, and so on. That there was almost like a beeline for people to have started using all of these type of terminologies and concepts. Later on, some people went on to question that is it that people always going to behave like robots and they're going to follow mathematics? Then it went on dawn upon some people, no. It doesn't. Is it that people always go on to move towards the nearest shop to buy something? The answer was no, they don't. Is it that the people always go on to behave like rational human beings? The answer was no. So some people said that it is indeed not exactly that the people go on to behave mathematically. They go on to take example of they go on to take help of their perception. They go on to take help of their cognition. They go on to take help of their behavioral elements from the environment and the aesthetic aspect of it. And what goes on to help a human being to take a decision is not determined by mathematics at all. Mathematics may be sometimes one factor of determining it, but that is not so. It is ultimately the behavior guided by the psychology of the people that determines it. So that ushered in another paradigm that was called as behavioral revolution. And then subsequently, another paradigm came, that is the basic job of geography should be to provide welfare to the people and be welfare oriented as well. That has led to idealism, Marxism, welfare oriented geography and radical geography that have been other paradigms as well of recent. That's the way the answer was to be approached. That is paper 1 and test number 9.